Okay, so I wanted to talk about something that's kind of very personal to me and someone who's helped me immensely in the past 2 years, year and a half. Jordan Peterson. So it's strange because after Ray died, I was pretty desperate, looking for help as far as how I should deal with it all. And, I came across 12 Rules for Life, which is a book written by Jordan Peterson. I started when I found his YouTube. He's all over YouTube. He's very well known. He was on the Joe Rogan show, podcast, and he's all over YouTube. His lectures. So he's a professor in Canada, and he first showed up on the social media scene because Canada started passing these laws that required people in universities, especially. This is where it became an issue for him. Canada was trying to pass a law to require people to use pronouns, chosen pronouns, for people who identify in ways that's other than what's visibly, in other ways than they've previously been identified as. So cis, they, them, those kind of pronouns, which he didn't have anything against. He had something against. He was speaking out against the law being passed because it was an assault on free speech. If you're forced to use certain words, then it's goes against a freedom of speech. So he spoke out against it, and it created a shitstorm in social media of, there were anti-Jordan Peterson, and there were people who found him very helpful. Anyways, he started posting his lectures on YouTube, his long lectures. He's a modern day philosopher, really. He's a psychologist. He's very well known in academia for psychology, and he's become kind of like the young white man's, I hate to say it like that because it sounds, I shouldn't say that, but the majority of his followers, people who show up to his lectures, are overwhelmingly white guys in their 30s, early 30s and late 20s. And it's because a lot of his lectures are aimed at young men who don't have a direction, and he starts to point out the reasons why young men in general, specifically, don't have a lot of direction in today's culture. And he started to talk about the culture of avoiding responsibility and the culture of blame, and just things that were super helpful to me. He wrote a book called 12 Rules for Life. So after listening to a bunch of his lectures, and it just was very helpful to me. He was very honest about the way that you should deal with problems and the way to become a better person. And his book, 12 Rules for Life, is such a good, it's a good way to change your perspective about things that have happened to you in your life and the way that your position in life. It was very helpful. So, but the recent news with him, I'm using his book and watching his lectures after my wife had passed from cancer, and as a way to deal with that. And then it came out in the news that his wife was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Something I knew nothing about. Apparently she had battled with it for a while, but I didn't know anything about that when I started to get into Jordan Peterson. And the recent news, his wife was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he was very anxious about it, and I can identify with that. I started to really I was just shocked that he was dealing with something like that too. But I can imagine what that must be like when you're that big and you have all these. He's very well known. He had all these dates books and lectures and talks and things like that. And your wife gets diagnosed, and it brings that all to a halt. And if you're still doing that, you can cause a lot of anxiety, him not being there, or worrying about not being there to help her or to be with her. I imagine that must cause a ton of anxiety. So he was prescribed benzodiazepines. Now, it's just crazy. So I identify with him with his loved one and the worry that comes with a terminal diagnosis for someone you love. And I used his lectures and talks on how to deal with that after she passed. And then it just came out in the news, within the past couple months, that he checked himself into a rehab for benzodiazepines. So apparently he went to the doctor. He was having panic attacks about his wife and everything. And the doctor irresponsibly prescribed him with low doses of benzodiazepines, Klonopin. And he had a terrible reaction to it. Not only did he become physically dependent, but it started to cause like psychosis and things for him. So he checked himself into rehab, and it's been very public. His daughter still posts on his podcast and still posts on YouTube updates, family updates. And my heart goes out to the family, because I do know, obviously, I have a lot of experience with both of those things. Dealing with a loved one who's been terminally diagnosed and dealing with addiction. And I cannot imagine dealing with one and then the other back to back. It must be brutal. Luckily I had my addiction stuff. I had worked out before, right around the time that I started dating Rachel. Before I was 3 years clean when I met her, and I had one bad relapse, and that was the end for me. I've spoke about this before, but it's been 13, 14 years now. I've been clean, so I think it'll be 14 years this spring. And it's amazing that now he's dealing with that. And apparently it was so bad that he went to Russia to do a rapid detox of this benzo stuff. Now, from what I know, from what I hear, the withdrawal from benzos is worse than anything, worse than opiates and alcohol, and there's nothing worse. So I can't imagine what that must be like. And instead of weaning off of it, which I think is the protocol, he looked for something that could get him off of it completely. And I just listened to an update, and apparently he is completely medication free, and he's starting to feel better. But it's a long road to hoe, man. His wife is still around. I don't know if I think she had a bunch of surgeries, and I don't know if she's still terminal or not, but yeah, it was just crazy to hear about that after he had been so helpful for me. So yeah, it's all over the news, and yeah, the Democrats are having a hard time saying anything nice about Jordan Peterson. He doesn't identify as a Democrat. He seems very conservative, but I don't know if he's political, to be honest. I think he's just speaking about social dynamics in general. But yeah, they're really, the critics are going hard on him. Like, this is a field day for them. The guy who's talking about how to deal with life in a proper, respectful way, and they're finding out that he was given these pills, and then it became an addiction. I'm sure you could run with that and really attack his family, but, I really don't think they should post anything. I think they should just stop and let the family deal with this. These are personal problems someone's dealing with. If you want to speak out against things that he's posting, his lectures and talks, he's making them public, so he's opening himself up for debate. But when it comes to this personal stuff, I really, I think as far as media goes, or social media or anything, no one should you can't attack a person on personal problems, especially when you don't have any experience with dealing with those things. So, yeah, I wanted to bring that up because, I just wanted to share that Jordan Peterson in his book has been extremely helpful for me in getting along with my life after dealing with a tragedy. So my heart goes out to the Peterson family, and I'm sure he will be back on the scene soon. Regardless what your opinion is of him, he has been very helpful to a lot of young men in particular in this country. And when I first found out about him, it was a friend, Brian, this chef friend of mine, who was a fan of Jordan Peterson. He said, check out Jordan Peterson. And I was super liberal, against Jordan Peterson, just based on what I heard about him. And I was doing all this research to formulate my argument against him. And that's when I started to become a fan. So that says a lot. I didn't go into it looking for some conservative backup for my own ideas. I went into Jordan Peterson looking for to formulate my argument against him, because I heard about him. Brian was telling me what his stance was on all this Canadian stuff, and I just thought, Jesus, he sounds terrible. But this is not the case. In my research, in my hate search against him, I became a huge fan. So yeah, just want a little update on that. Look into it, look into this guy. His work is pretty, it just makes a lot of sense to someone like me. So yeah, that's it. That's all I got for today. Mike's not here, so I'm not going to continue the show, but I just want to do a quick post. Mikey Moo, I hope everything is going well. If you're listening to this, send me a text. Let me know when you're free next, and stay safe out in the field. All right, brother.